I'm Alycia Darby. Thanks so much for coming to the Win a Pageant YouTube channel. This video that you're about to watch is a part of a bigger series that I did on controversial topics, and I would love for you to be able to check out all of the videos. So at the end of this video, I'll make sure that I link the others so that you can watch everything, so that you have a bigger picture of how you can apply this strategy in your next pageant. We're talking about controversial topics, and specifically as a pageant final question. And for those of you who are watching the replay, I hope that this is something that encourages and inspires you as well in order to lean into your own beliefs. Everybody knows the pageant final question usually brings a massive amount of nerves and a huge amount of because of the fact that you are answering an often unknown question that is even more often somewhat controversial or extremely controversial, that is inviting you to share your heart and to share your belief system in front of an audience of people who do not really know you, who think they probably know you, and in front of 5 strangers or more who are literally going to score you from 0 to 10. That is why this video right now is so important. I like to take a Christian perspective to look at how to win a pageant. So I'm going to share with you my personal belief system in this video. So I just want to give you that as a trigger warning for those of you who know already that you don't want to tune into that and you're like, this isn't the voice that I want to learn from. I really believe that you need to consider the source of where you get your information. So I'm sharing with you my heart today that the source of my information is the Bible. And I truly believe that the Bible is truth. And when I teach from the Bible, I realize that things actually work even in the world. And I think that there are many concepts that are universal concepts, like I've used in examples before, like the idea of karma, what goes around comes around, some people say, or like karma is if you do something mean to somebody, you will have something mean done unto you. Okay. In the Bible, they talk about, and I forget exactly who wrote this part of the Bible, but it's the concept of sowing and reaping. There's seasons for everything. And what you sow is what you will reap. And so I am giving you this context because I think it's important for you to understand my mind and sort of where I'm coming from with how I bring to you this concept. So I'm going to share with you in this video some strategy. I love strategy and I love step by step, and I'd like you to understand why. And so we're going to talk about the why controversial topics, particularly right now in our culture, are so difficult to answer. Even if you feel like you really are convicted in your belief system, whatever it may be, it can still be very difficult to answer these questions. We're going to unpack that first why. And then I'm going to share with you some of my personal beliefs so that if you do share my belief system, you'll be able to perhaps even adopt or even adapt some of the ways that I communicate for yourself. Okay, so that's where we are going. A little bit different than usual, but I think that this is such an important time in history and in your pageant journey to be able to have these types of conversations. Okay, so there are 3 main things that get in the way of every pageant person, and not just pageant women, but of everybody in having just general discussions with reasonable people about controversial topics, okay? First, let me define for you what a controversial topic might be. In my program, let me see if I have one sec. Okay, I have it here. In my program, in the Win a Pageant Academy, my girls get a training on how to answer controversial questions. I'm going to give you the highlights right now, okay? Essentially, controversial topics are controversial because there are so many different angles to see a thing. Usually, there is a moral angle and a political angle, okay? So when you think about the controversial questions that you might be nervous to, and rightfully so, to be able to discuss with people, I have a list here. I have a list. This is for my girls. is one. The immigration, vaccines. These are some of the things that are like hot button issues. And even on YouTube, I have to bleep some of these things out, okay? Because they're that hot button, okay? But all of these controversial topics are things that most reasonable people want to have dialogue around. We want to share our moral stance and we want to share our political stance. And sometimes those things could be even very different. And that's why these things are so controversial, okay? So I want to kind of just give you an umbrella of like, this is the thing that we are talking about here, okay? So now what is getting in the way of us just being able to like have a normal conversation about this stuff? Like, why is it that when you are asked a question about any number of these things, you feel that tension in your throat and you're like, oh my gosh, like, and you get the instant sensation of like, okay, how do I say that? I literally have some of my clients have asked me this because I know their heart is they don't want to offend anybody. They want to be seen as somebody who is a leader of the people, and yet they feel like their stance, if it's different from somebody else, they might not be welcomed, or they might not be scored well, or they might actually become the target of like all types of problems, okay? That's why this is happening. So let's break this down. Okay. The first thing that I believe that is getting in our way, the way of reasonable people having reasonable conversations to figure out the tough stuff in our world. The very first thing that's getting in our way is what we now refer to as cancel culture, okay? You probably all know what I'm talking about. The idea of cancel culture is this thing that's happening right now. This is a newer term, maybe within the last, 5 years or so. And it's this concept that if somebody in our community says or does a thing that somebody else in the community takes offense to, then that person who took the offense is now going to tell all their other friends, this person offended me, let's cancel them. Now, how this might look is a celebrity says something that maybe is taken out of context, or maybe that they didn't really think through what they were saying, or that maybe they believed at that time and they didn't have enough conversation to understand what they, a different perspective. And so because of all of these reasons, or it really could be someone just says something outrightly dumb. This happens, okay? And somebody else then takes offense and they say, I'm offended at that person, therefore I'm canceling them. This might look like unfollowing them on social media, which, by the way, I am a big fan of the unfollow button. If somebody is somebody that you do not want to take information from or leadership from, just unfollow them. That's a beautiful, wonderful thing about social media, is that you do not have to tune into their station. You can unfollow them, okay? Myself included. If you don't like what I say, that's what the unfollow button is for, okay? So I really think that that is important for us to protect our own minds as well, not to shelter us from other people's opinions, but because social media is like a channel clicker, right? So you don't have to be on everybody's channel. A lot of people will be going through this cancel culture experience, and what it looks like in our world is we might say, oh, we're going to cancel this person. And then all of a sudden, nobody is going to eat at their restaurant, for example. So we say, we're going to cancel so-and-so because they said one comment that offended somebody, and now they're going to just offend our whole community. And so now our whole community is going to just cancel that person. It can also look like, in even smaller communities, it can look like ostracizing a person from their community. So it can look like hate messages. It can look like sharing somebody, putting them on blast. So like saying, oh, we're going to share this one clip of this person, something that they may have even said 10 years ago. We're going to share this across all of social media and get everybody else to also not like this person anymore. The concept of cancel culture is setting us up to defend our position instead of having an open dialogue. And when we have this idea that if I say something wrong, other people might take offense to it, and therefore they are going to then treat me differently, This is the idea of cancel culture. And this is showing up even in teens and high schools and in colleges and in even elementary schools, where other kids are saying like, oh, we don't like that person. Everybody, we're going to cancel them. You're canceled. And then we're not going to invite you to play on the playground. We're not going to. And it's like, but why are we doing this? The whole point of these types of dialogues and being open to these types of dialogues is to be able to help each other have the conversation actually in order to solve the bigger problems that we are facing in our world. But cancel culture is making that not happen. Remember that I truly believe that reasonable people are able to have reasonable conversations with others, even those that don't agree with their side, because of the fact that they're just reasonable. It's reasonable that that experience that you had in your life has led you to where you are today. It's reasonable to believe that because that is your belief system, that this would be the action that you would take. That's absolutely reasonable. Most people, I truly believe that most people on this planet are reasonable people. And I think cancel culture is such a very small but extremely loud subset of our culture that the type of person that is like a canceler is probably the type of person that you wouldn't even want to sit at a coffee shop and even have this type of conversation with, because they're so quick to judge. They're so quick to just shut down. That offense, I want to read you what the Bible says about taking offense, because I believe this is where it comes from. And I mentioned earlier that my belief system comes from a biblical belief system, okay? This is what I teach from. And so in Luke, the Bible talks about, it actually says that it is impossible for no offense to come. And I love that because it says that even for reasonable people, offenses will come. They're going to come. You're going to have opportunities to be offended, but you do not have to take them. You don't have to take offense. You can allow it to go. You can say, you know what? That makes perfect sense for that person from their experience, that's how they would feel. It doesn't need to be my job to change their opinion. And it also doesn't need to be my job to cancel them just because they have that opinion. But rather, what if we all were just allowed to have our opinions after all? And wouldn't it be cool if we could actually discuss them so that we could help to shape each other, help to understand other people's perspectives and where they're coming from and why they, and be able to be like, wait, what? I never even thought of that. Like my limited experience and your limited experience are helping us see that we're limited. But what if we were able to get together and to share this and not be offended by what the other person said, but instead allow our hearts to say, look, this is my belief, this is where I'm at, and here's what I want to offer. And then the other person gets to say, well, here's my belief, here's where I'm at, and here's what I want to offer. And then we can say, wow, I could see why you would believe that way, and I still love what I believe. And they can say, great, me too, perfect. We could high five and be like, great, I'm glad you believe what you believe and I believe what I believe. That is why we live in a free country here in America. Now, let me share with you this. This is another sort of like subset of this. We often are open to offense from the people that we are closest to. And so I could stand here all day and say, we should be unoffendable. I don't want you to ever be offended. I want you to just stand in your belief system and say, you know what? This is what I believe, and it's a great, wonderful thing. However, I've also been hurt by people who are close to me. And they might say a thing or do a thing that I am just hurt by emotionally. What I've found is that offense tends to happen from a place of wounding. It's inside of me, a wound that may exist from a past trauma, and trauma is defined by the person. So even though you might say, Alycia, come on, that's not a trauma. But if I say, no, it is a trauma. I was traumatized by this thing that happened in my life, then who are you to say it's my trauma, right? But that usually, those wounds that have not yet been healed, those tend to be the places that offenses happen. And we tend to be more open to offenses. The wounds are more fragile to somebody that we know, love, and trust. And so if somebody that we know and we love and we trust has done a thing or created an offense, the offenses will come. The Bible tells us the offenses will come. It is our duty to heal those wounds so that we don't have this open wound that could easily be offended. You know, in seasons in your life when you were easily offendable. I remember for me, this was right after birth, right after I gave birth to my daughter, and even throughout my pregnancy, I was fragile. And so I was easily offendable. You know, it's like when somebody makes, even now that my diastasis recti, which is like when your abs are separated and you have this like mommy pouch and stuff. If somebody today were to say to me, "Oh, you look pregnant." I gave birth to my daughter a year ago. If they say, "Oh, you look pregnant. How far along are you?" I would not take offense to that now, but I probably would have a few months ago, because it was just a place in my heart that I felt wounded. I felt broken. I felt like, gosh, is this ever going to heal? Like, what is wrong with me? Usually from the areas of our life that are wounded, and I'm sure you can think of those times for you too, that is typically where we take offense. Now, that was a more surface level, simple example, but there are a lot of other examples of people that are living with true traumas that many of us would say, wow, yes, I'm so sad that that person had to go through that awful experience. And then we say a thing that we didn't even mean to say. We're not meaning to hurt anybody. We didn't even know that they had that open wound. And yet we said a thing and they took offense, usually because of an open wound. And now we feel bad. You would feel bad, right? That's why you're like, how do I answer these questions? Because I don't want to hurt people in their areas of woundedness, right? And the reason of that is because of offense and because of cancel culture, okay? Those things kind of go together. One of the main reasons that it makes it difficult for you to be able to have these open dialogues, to be able to share your heart and your belief system on stage, is because of you're afraid that you're going to be canceled by somebody else taking personal offense from a wound that they have living in them that then they get offended by. And then they're going to cancel you. That is what we are trying to avoid. Okay, now point number 2, okay? The second thing that I believe that is happening in our world today, more than any time in history, however, it has happened in the past history, it's just happening more now than ever, is the idea of mass messaging. Mass messaging. Now, messaging has forever been a thing. You would remember, if you're my age, you would remember in textbooks in school, reading in probably the 5th grade or something, we first learned about the word propaganda. And propaganda was used often during the world wars, particularly I believe it started in World War II, but it's happened in every world war and every nation across the world. Propaganda is essentially an advertisement for a certain idea. It's advertising an idea, a concept, not a product. It's advertising an idea, okay? And this advertisement, as you know, imagine you see an advertisement for, Coca-Cola. And Coca-Cola, they're going to make it look refreshing. It's going to be dripping in some ice. It's going to feel really refreshing. It's going to be bright and it's going to feel energizing. And they're going to be like, 1 Coke a day does the body good, right? Something like this. Advertising is positioning the product in a positive light. This is the idea of what propaganda is intending to do. It's positioning a singular message in a light that they want you to believe, okay? And they being whomever's putting out the propaganda, okay? Just like whomever's putting out the advertisement. This type of propaganda usually is cultivated by a government, okay? Or some political power, because the political power has the opportunity to get access to all of the people. So when you look back historically, that's where propaganda tends to come from. In more current times, you would see this as, and for you millennials, you would have heard the word clickbait. Okay, clickbait is an online concept. And clickbait is when somebody says some crazy title that may or may not be true, just to get you curious enough to click on it. Okay, whether or not it's true. And they call it clickbait because it's baiting you to click on this thing. Okay, so you see this a lot in BuzzFeed. Okay, so you're familiar probably with the brand BuzzFeed. BuzzFeed did a study where they were trying to determine, is it their articles about the most recent political election in the US? They were trying to decide, are the articles that are highlighting the actual facts of the thing doing better? Are more people clicking on that? Or are more people clicking on the things that are actually have a headline that is not a factual headline. And they actually found that far exceeding the real titles were the titles that were actually inaccurate. It was what they would consider clickbait. And clickbait is usually illegal because we don't want people putting out all this kind of crazy stuff. But it happens very, very often, okay? You guys know what I'm talking about, okay? This is what you've probably heard President Trump be like, fake news, you know? He's not talking about any new kind of concept. He just coined it a new name. But the idea is that people everywhere around the world and forever throughout history will always be saying a thing that's not true, okay? Now, in America, our forefathers protected that right. They want everybody to be with free speech. They want everybody to be able to say whatever the heck they want, okay? In America right now, everybody is saying whatever the heck that they want. That can cause a lot of confusion, right? Because we're like, well, wait a minute, which one are we supposed to listen to? Mass media and media being television, being social media, all of the outlets that are able to have one message reaching the masses, that is called mass messaging. It's not a new concept, okay? Television is telling us a vision, and it tends to be a one-sided opinion. The reason for that is because of where all the things come from, right? There's this, I mean, you girls are smart. You know that this is not like, I'm not telling you anything new, that generally the things that we see all over, the things that get promoted, it's coming from a centralized message. And I'm not saying it's any one Democratic or Republican party, or it's any one certain person or it's only from the president, or it's only from the deep state, or like, I'm not even talking about any of that. What I'm saying is that probably all of these people are creating messaging that is attempting to get you to feel associated with one or the other. We know that algorithms across social media, for those of you that engage in social media like I do or are interested in these types of algorithms, we know that social media, the way that social media works best is when you like a certain type of post that has a certain type of slant, you will start seeing more posts that have that same angle to them. And the other side, if you like posts that have the slant in the other direction, you'll start seeing more of that. So there's mass messaging going on from every angle. Everybody's trying to use propaganda to help you believe their side of it, okay? In America, that's very confusing because we're seeing all of the sides of it, and it can be very difficult, okay? So mass messaging. Now, how do you as an individual, if you're like, whoa, wait a second, Alycia, this is happening. Do you really think so? Like, how can I be sure that's happening? Or I don't even believe you, that's not true. I'm glad that you are using critical thinking. So one of the things that fact checkers will start to see is like they have a checklist of the things that say like, okay, this, whether or not this thing is true. What if fact checkers look, like people tease like, oh, the fact checker is like, fact check this and found, blah, blah, blah. The things that they are really looking for is they're trying to find if there is evidence that supports it anywhere else other than just that one place. So is anyone else saying the same thing? Or is this just coming from one source? So they're looking at the sources. Are there multiple sources? Do people agree on this? Or is it really just coming from one area? So what tends to happen is that if you are not using a critical thinking mind, then you will easily fall into all of the mass messaging that's going on. I give my mom a hard time for this all the time because she will read an article in like a Cosmo magazine and she'll be like, Alycia, did you know that people who have more children, let's say, like people who have multiple children tend to exercise more or something like this, And I'm like, what, Mom? What does that even mean? Like, how did they even do that study? Oh, we're going to have these people who don't have many children and these people do have, and now we're going to see who works out more. And it's like, it would make sense that the person who has more children, I don't think it's that they just like, they're the type of person who also thinks they work out. Like, you have to use your critical brain, right? Is this really what's going on? Like, okay, or people who are, like I'm making up these things, like people who are a smoker tend to exercise less, let's say. And it's like, well, but do they? Or is that just because where they got those things, they went to a gym and they're like, okay, are you a smoker? Are you a smoker? Are you a smoker? No, 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 no. Oh, well, we only have a few smokers and the rest of these people aren't smokers and they're at the gym. What? That's a terrible study. That's not really accessing the entire population, right? This is like somebody who goes to a specific city and they're like, we're going to ask this city how this city feels about the pollution or something. And it's like, maybe their pollution isn't even really affecting them. And you're asking them, but then you go to the farmland where the pollution is affecting them and you're like going to ask them about, well, who are we really talking? Do you see what I'm saying? We've got to get your critical thinking has to turn on, okay? That is one of the deciding factors to help you realize, am I being misled here at all, or is this something that's truly accurate? The most effective propaganda is propaganda that does this. It offers a collective villain to the people. So good propaganda, effective. I shouldn't say good, because who am I to judge the good or the bad? It depends on where it's coming from, right? The effective propaganda comes when you pit the people against a common villain. Okay, who are we against, and and it offers the people an opportunity to be the hero. Okay. You remember one of the famous pieces of propaganda was this one, the woman, Rosie the Riveter, right? And excuse my bra strap there. And Rosie the Riveter became known for, Rosie the Riveter was, if you read about her story, it has nothing to do with but they used that as like, look how strong our girls are. They're getting into the workforce now in order to encourage women to work in the factory, because that's what they needed during the war. That's what they were hoping for. And so by painting a positive image of a strong woman who's like, I want to go to the factory. Look how strong I am. Now it's saying a positive message, and look, you can be a hero too, right? You remember the one with Uncle Sam, the original picture of Uncle Sam with the white hair and that tall American hat. I want you to be in the U.S. Army. And it was like, ooh, he looked strong and powerful and he wanted me. I could be a hero if I joined the army, right? These are effective examples of propaganda. They have a villain and they paint the hero as you. If you do this thing, you could be a hero too. Okay, so I want you to understand that this is the concept of mass messaging. And because there's mass messaging, there usually is what we might see or nowadays call an unpopular opinion. In the last few months, there has been a social media trend where people will say, share an unpopular opinion. And then people will be like, unpopular opinion, my favorite ice cream is bubblegum ice cream. And other people will be like, ew, that's gross. I can't believe that's your opinion. Ha ha ha. Unpopular opinion, my favorite kind of coffee is just black coffee. What? That's so lame. What do you mean? You should add all the free stuff. Ha ha ha. What an unpopular opinion. But what's happening, this is a picture for what we really are seeing in the world, where people feel as though, perhaps you, myself included, we feel as though if there is a mass messaging that is sharing some opinion, and they're out there on all types of opinions, okay, you might feel if your opinion is different than that one, you might feel like it's unpopular. You don't know whether or not it is, in fact, because the only message that you're receiving is the mass message. Those that are in power that are sharing the message, right? That you keep seeing all over everywhere. And you're like, oh my gosh, it seems like fill in the blank, because of the fact that that's the thing you keep on seeing. And because social media is AI smart, it keeps feeding you the same stuff over and over. And you're like, oh my gosh, what the heck is going on in the world today? And you're like, my opinion must be an unpopular opinion because it's different than the message that's out there. And that is the second reason that you might feel like you're not able to say your belief system, because maybe it isn't what you see in mass messaging. And so you feel like, gosh, I might have an unpopular opinion. And if I share my unpopular opinion, then I might be canceled. And so these are the first two ways I want to share with you: cancel culture and also mass messaging that could be getting in the way of you just honestly being able to share your personal beliefs. Now, the third concept, okay? The third thing that I want to share with you. So, we've already covered that the things that could get in your way in a controversial conversation, whether it's in your onstage final answer, or if it's in an interview, or even if it's just at a gala, even if you don't have your crown and sash on, these are things that are going to be coming up for you, right? In today's day and age, they're coming up for all of us, which I think is a wonderful thing. I love that we're all into politics now. Finally, we all realize like our voice does matter. We get to do a thing about it, right? But all these things can be hindering you. The first is cancel culture, which we previously spoke about. The second is mass messaging. That can get in the way too. And the third thing I want to talk with you about today that I believe is getting in our way of being able to have authentic conversations and truly just share your actual opinion without sugarcoating it and what you think everyone else believes. I think that this is confusing rhetoric. The confusing rhetoric that is getting passed all around our world. I've got some examples for you, but first let me explain rhetoric. Rhetoric is essentially the words that we are using to describe a thing. And words, as you know, I'm sure you know this, carry an energy, you know? God created us as creative beings. We are created in his image. We are the only animal, the only mammal on the planet that is created in God's image. And the thing that God is known for, his claim to fame, is creation. And that is something that we have inside of us. We are able to create. And the Bible says that we create with our words. I believe that we first create inside of our mind in the spirit realm, like what's there, we see it, we have a vision for it, and then we speak it into life, and then we actually do it. And so our words, the Bible says that the power of life and death is in the tongue. It's what you're speaking. You're speaking life or you're speaking death. Which is it? And so when we twist our rhetoric a little bit, it can lead to a connotation. So let me explain connotations. Okay, I know we're getting deep here, okay, but I think all this stuff is important for you to understand so that you are able to approach this in a way that's like, okay, now what do I believe and how do I share it in the very best way possible? Okay, so connotations are either positive or negative, okay? So this would be like if I said party. The word party has a positive connotation. When I'm like party, it's like you're like, oh, a party? Yay, I like parties. I want to go to a party. But if I say something like dirt, you might be like, oh, dirt? Ew, I don't really like dirt. I don't want dirt. Like if I say cake, you might be like, oh, cake, I want a piece of cake. But if I say something like, gosh, let me get a good negative one. I tend to not have very negative examples, which I think is probably a really good thing. Pain. If I say pain, even just saying the word pain makes me go, pain. Like it has a negative connotation. And so what tends to happen in our world, and this is just a part of advertising, this is a part of propaganda, this is part of mass messaging, it's all of the things that in order to get others, as a leader, in order to get others to follow you, and you need to know this because you are a leader, and so you have to have an understanding of what's happening so that you don't end up following the thing you don't want to follow, but also so that you don't end up leading in a way that's ineffective. The best form of leadership comes from a place of truth, absolute truth. What tends to happen is that people will take the truth and they'll just twist it just enough to get it to fit into the culture. That's what's happening right now. I'm going to give you a few examples of this, okay? And this little bit of a twist is confusing people enough that would have otherwise believed something totally different. Now they're confused because now they're like, oh, wait a second, but that part I like. But remember, we talked about how the enemy will always weave a little bit of a lie into some truth. And that's how you believe it. You're not a dummy. If he just gave you a bold-faced lie, you wouldn't believe it because you're not dumb. But if you were to get a little bit of truth and then a little lie, then the lie feels a little bit easier to believe. Thanks so much for watching. Remember that this video is a part of a bigger series, so check out these other videos that go along with it so that you've got the entire strategy. Thanks for watching.